All right, we'll give it a few seconds for some folks to join before we hop in. Let's join in now. Cool. I think we will go ahead and get started. So welcome everyone. This is our third part of our People Analytics Unplugged webinar series. Super excited about this one to hop in with Michael Moon, Steve Commandeer, and Madhura Chakrabarti as we talk about demystifying some of the People Analytics titles. There are so many titles out there for different roles across many different organizations. So really want to understand from our experts here kind of what those titles mean. How do these roles shape up? What do they look like? And kind of what are the skills needed to be in some of the roles that are out there? And so going to hop in with introductions of our panelists and going to ask our panelists as they introduce themselves to give a little bit more detail about the path they took. All of our experts here have fantastic careers, and so really want to hear about some of their paths and how they got to where they are. And also just education and background too would be helpful. So gonna hop right in and going to start with Michael. You are up first on my screen.
Oh, wow. Okay. So, hi, I'm Michael Moon. I am currently the Director of People Intelligence for a company called Viasat. And I also am a lecturer at Columbia University teaching people analytics to human capital management students. I think we're going to hear from the other panelists. I don't know for sure, a very non-traditional background when it comes to the education of how I got here. I actually started out as a stage actress. I have a couple of degrees in theater and musical theater. But then I ended up with a master's in human resources, a PhD in human capital management, and recently a master's in data science. I am going to be very honest and say I don't think you need any of those degrees to do this work. Having attended a STEM high school in Maryland, I was very interested in math and science and kind of logic and research, and it just took me a while to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up. So that's my path. I've been in HR roles, HR technology for a while, HR technology analyst, research roles, consulting, and then practitioner work.
Nice, love it. Thank you. Madhura, you're up next.
Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. I am Madhura Chakrabarti. I am an industrial organizational psychologist and statistician by training, and I have always toggled between practitioner roles and consulting roles in the realm of people analytics. Most recently, I led the People Insights and Analytics team globally at Syngenta. For those of you who don't know, it's an agriculture company based out of Basel, Switzerland. I did that for 5 years. Before that was with Deloitte back in San Francisco, also doing employee engagement and people analytics, but more as an industry analyst and consultant. And before that was with Dell Technologies as a practitioner doing employee engagement and people analytics. So as you can see, I've had quite a varied career, but always within people analytics. And yes, that's who I am. Currently, I have left Syngenta, so taking a bit of a break as we have internationally relocated to the UK. But happy to talk about people analytics and whatever questions are there.
Awesome. Thanks, Sam. Over to you, Steve.
Hi everyone, Steve Commandeer. I'm in Minneapolis. I live here in the Midwest where we just got a ton of snow after we thought spring was upon us. So none of us are really happy around here, but happy to be on the call today to talk about people analytics. I work at Accenture, which is a global professional services and tech firm. We have about 750,000 employees and we do professional services. We don't have products like a lot of other companies. So people analytics is really at the heart of what we do. I just finished the role of global people analytics lead at Accenture in January. That role was actually affected by a large corporate layoff that happened last year that it impacted about 20,000 roles across our corporate functions. And so there is no global people analytics lead at Accenture now. The team was divided up a little bit. So I'm currently working as a talent and HR operations executive in our our HR operations practice. So I'm client facing, and I've broadened my role a little bit. People analytics is still sort of part of the scope, but now I'm working to sell and deliver HR operations engagements for our clients and working on our offerings. I didn't have a traditional I guess there is no traditional background for people analytics if you take what we've told you for truth. But like I had never worked in HR, nor had I ever done an analytic role when I came into the role of people analytics lead at Accenture, and that's largely because they weren't looking for someone with analytics specialization, nor did they necessarily need someone with HR. They needed someone that could lead a large team and develop a team. The team at Accenture was about 400 people across the whole spectrum of everything from the upfront data to the tech and data science. So what they really needed was someone with the background and the skills that could develop and build capabilities in teams. And before that, I had done sort of chief of staff, COO, director of operations type roles where I had a component of data and analytic work that was kind of always a part of it. I had some HR and people responsibilities as well, but I had never been in a people analytics role. But it was certainly a great learning opportunity. I learned a lot about the field and met a lot of great people. So I'm happy to still be connected in that way. So that's me.
So no, I appreciate the introductions, and this is actually a really good lead-in for our next session when we're talking about career paths, because everyone here has a different non-traditional type background, so it's really cool to see. So as Rachel put in the chat, feel free to weigh in, ask any questions as we go along. I'm going to dive into a little bit about kind of people analytics roles. And so can you describe a day in a role that you consider true people analytics? And kind of what was the title and what were some of the skills needed for that job? And Steve, you're on the screen first, so I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, and I think like a lot of the questions around this, my personal belief is there isn't one specific right answer, but at Accenture on our team, we had people that did what we called insights and analytics advisory roles. So they were kind of our customer-facing consultants and advisors to help our HR and business leaders understand what to do with the data and the tools that we were putting in front of them and how to interpret the findings and apply them to the decisions that needed to be made and the goals that we had as a company. So, I would consider that a true people analytics role. Was it always in the data, in the sort of detailed data and really doing technical work? No, it was our customer facing role. So it was really a role that required a different skill set as opposed to, say, one of our data scientists, which spent their days in the data lake, programming and coding, and didn't work with our external customers a lot, but I still considered that a true role within our people analytics team. It was one of our core roles. So, I think for us, at least, we had a viewpoint where we considered lots of different types of roles, really true people analytics core roles, but they were certainly different from one another. Now, that was in a company that had the scale to have people doing different work in different pockets, where we'll probably hear from others that have had experience where maybe the roles were a little bit more combined or something, but that's how we viewed it at Accenture.
Love that. Madura, Michael, anything to add in?
I mean, Steve, you're literally just said what I was about to say, right? Which is when you're working with a lean team, then it becomes this collection of skills, right? And then you're borrowing talent potentially from other functions. So I think, and I absolutely echo, I think in terms of when I think about true people analytics, it's not about producing numbers or a pretty report or a pretty chart, but it's actually helping your customers understand what to do with that data, consulting with them, helping them help drive the design of whatever that product is that you're rolling out, so they can make very key decisions about people and about the business. So that's how I would define, what a real people analytics project or work would do is how that the work that the team does actually helps the business itself, as well as the HR function that we support in most cases.
I guess I'll add to that with a very different answer. So, Stephanie, you're going to get a variety of answers on this question. So for me, when I think back a couple of roles back at a different organization, one of the HRL team members or HR leadership team members came to our team and said, I want to understand if people working from home are any better off than people who come on site. And this was way before the pandemic. But this was still a pertinent question back then, because that organization believed very strongly in work from home culture. culture and would encourage flexible work. So that analysis was done by my team, or rather back then by me, looking at, first of all, understanding what do you mean better off, right? So are we looking at productivity? Are we looking at engagement? Are we looking at collaboration? So what is the outcome or outcomes that we are looking at, promotability, etc.? And then doing a whole bunch of statistical analysis to understand what are the different groups, people who work from home remotely all 5 days versus come in 3 or 4 days a week versus people who work on site all 5 days, right? So defining the different groups, doing the statistical analysis, getting the data, building the story, and then presenting it back to the leadership team. To me, that was a true people analytics project or question that came. In terms of skills, other than the ones that I mentioned, I also felt that there's a certain skill of marketability or wanting to market the work that you have done that's very necessary, because once you have already presented to the leadership, what do you do with those findings, right? So you try to educate other HRBPs, or you present at different forums within the company. So during that piece of work, I felt there was some need for marketing the analytics or the work that the team has done in order to spread the word or create awareness around that topic. Yeah.
The difference in our responses too. I do think that there is no real kind of obvious answer to what people analytics is. I think as a field, we're still trying to navigate and figure out what it is in general. But using data to really drive change in organizations, I think that was the consistent theme I heard across the responses. That's kind of making sure that where we sit and what people analytics truly is. And so when you think about titles specifically, since it's about demystifying some of the titles, what are some of the titles of people analytics roles you've either held or you know of? And kind of how does the perception of people analytics change depending on what that title is? Michael, I'll start with you this go around.
Yeah, I mean, in some cases, so when I first started at Viasat, I was the director of people analytics, and I also owned employee listening. And a couple of months in, after doing my listening tour and kind of understanding what was needed and what people were really looking for and what were they actually honestly ready for, I wanted to build a different, I wanted to call the team something different, because I wanted it to be able to have room for future, right? So we weren't, and we still aren't, but we're trying to work towards, bringing in external labor market data, and just leveraging other sources of data that may not be not HR data, or may not be generated within our own organization. And so I did change the team name to People Intelligence, so that kind of, it's a bigger umbrella. And sometimes I've done that in the past, where I've changed the team name just simply because it sounds silly, but having a different name sometimes can help people see what you do in a different mindset, right? So if I was still director of, I don't do reporting, but if I was the director of reporting and I'm trying to actually build people analytics, just simply changing the name, they're like, oh, okay. And that begins that path, right? I do a lot of education on what are reports, what are metrics, what's analytics, what's analysis. And sometimes you just have to have a different name, right, to get people, right, to think in that mindset. So I've, been director of people insights, director of people analytics, director of people intelligence. Those have been like the primary roles that titles I've had. And then early in my career was like HRIS, reporting and analytics, but we were just doing reporting. It's kind of that early trend where we were tacking on analytics to the end of our titles, but we were still just doing.
Steven, anything to add in?
Yeah, I will tell a little story, I guess, of how we evolved the titling at Accenture. Similar to what Michael shared, before I took the team on, I know that the team went through some iterations where one of the team names and what people were called was business inquiries, which kind of tells you really was very limited in scope. It was just about sort of answering questions in the moment. And then it went to cross-functional reporting, and then it was HR reporting and analytics. Right before I took the team, they changed the name. It was called Reporting, Analytics, Insights, and Decisions RAID, and it was like the bug spray RAID, right? So that was like one of the first mandates I was given by my team, my leads that I was now managing, was like, let's change the name because we don't like it. And so we changed it to what was then being called kind of talent. We were calling HR talent at Accenture, which also then went by the wayside, but we were talent analytics and insights for a while. And then we finally landed on global people analytics because we realized that we needed it to be broad enough to encompass the fact that we don't just do data and reporting, but we don't always only focus on the analytics piece. There's this whole spectrum of stuff that we do. And we felt like people analytics was the most concise way to tell a very, the story of a very broadly skilled and broadly capable team that was doing a lot of different stuff, but it was really in the people space, and it was really to support work around analytics at the end of the day, which were informing our business decisions. So we went through some evolution there, and I think you've seen it in the industry a little bit too, where I think people analytics is probably maybe the most common way to refer to it now. But I mean, it's, there's lots of different ways to think about it, but that was our journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess I'll add to that. Definitely have seen and heard and maybe even worked in some of the titles that Michael and Steve talked about. The only other one that I've done or worked for is literally research, people analytics and employee engagement research, and that was the consulting / industry analyst role that I had a few years back, and that was also mostly to do with consulting with clients on people analytics, how to build their strategy, what type of talent should they be hiring, but it was under the bigger research umbrella. So I guess that is a little bit of a distinction from a pure practitioner role, but I mean, those roles are extremely interesting and gives you a very wide spectrum of what the lay of the land is.
Yeah. I don't know if it would make sense, Stephanie, to kind of look at this question that came in about how to differentiate data scientists from a people insights partner.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, go for it.
Well, my perspective on this is that, at Accenture, we look at it from a skills perspective. So everything kind of boils down to what are the skills required to do the role. But we looked at our people analytics, what we call our advisors, or what I would call, in other words, a partner, a business partner, as people that had the analytics skill secondary, and the primary skill set that we required from them was stakeholder management, communications, and the ability to understand data. But they weren't necessarily preparing or working in the data. They could if we needed them to, but we had analysts and other people that supported that work. So there was a sort of the skill set was a little bit flipped. Whereas a data scientist, the skill sets there are programming, machine language, AI, deep big data skills, right? I mean, so at least in our situation, our core data scientists weren't necessarily working with the external customers as much. They were taking problem sets or questions or tasks or whatever that we were giving them and working them in the data and producing stuff that then the customer facing people could use. So it was a matter of it being just, a very different kind of skill set, and but they worked closely together, and so that was kind of the beauty of it, is they were able to work closely together. I don't know what others' thoughts are on that.
I definitely agree with you, Steve. To me, they're very different. They're very different roles, and so I think when I see organizations, not only for my current one and past organizations, where it's like, well, you need to find one person, right, that can be a data engineer, a data scientist, a consultant. Like, that's unrealistic, right, to find that. And so you do need to build the team and either have those people with those separate kinds of skill sets, or again, borrowing from other areas within the business, or to be honest, sometimes it means there are just certain things on your strategy, your strat plan, where you're like, can't do that, right? I don't have the right skill set. But definitely see them as two distinct roles. But I do see there's that opportunity for each to learn from each other, because we need to be speaking the same language to an extent.
Yep.
That's great. Yeah, agree. Nothing unique to add here, Steph. We can move to the next question.
Yeah, awesome. That was a good question that was asked. And I think just listening to you all mention the roles and then seeing some of the ones popping up in the chat, like business partner, business intelligence, workforce planning, what are some of the challenges you all see with all of the different titles in the people analytics space? And what are some potential solutions for those challenges? And I'll start with you this time.
So I guess I've come to the conclusion after being in the field for a while now, is people analytics is not really a linear journey, and I've said this at quite a few forums. And what I mean by that is, as much as I love the maturity models and I've built them when I was with Deloitte in my previous years, I still think they're very useful frameworks. But when you think of a practitioner's life, you are doing level 3 one day, level 3 type of work, and then the very next day you are doing level 1 type work. So you are cleaning data or talking about how to fix a particular bug in a dashboard because of which it's yielding wrong data or the wrong graph, and the very next day an HRBP comes to you saying we want to measure collaboration, and you're pitching a whole new proposal about org network analysis, right? So that happens quite a bit, where you have to balance the pure operational work, data cleaning, governance type work with very, very strategic, what's the next big question that we can answer. And there, I think that's where the challenge lies. Sometimes the balance gets skewed in one direction or the other. From what I know, it mostly gets skewed on the operational side, because for most organizations, the data is still not in a good shape, and we don't have data dictionaries, we don't have a standard definition of metrics. Every business unit wants to have a different definition. So bringing that act together is often the challenge. And even though, I've had interviews where people have asked me about, AI and how can you use AI to solve the next big question. But when I speak to the team members, all they do is clean dashboards and produce dashboards, right? So there's a huge mismatch, I feel, in the field today. And that's really where the challenge lies.
Yeah, I 1000% agree. I think that the challenge, we're still in that operational space. And I think trying to bring the organization along for the ride and help them see that isn't people analytics. Sometimes, I've had experiences not only in consulting but also at prior organizations where metrics, that's it, that's the holy grail, that's people analytics. And every once in a while, I get really excited. I get brought in. So I kind of to you example, Madura. Now this one was post-COVID, but a company was really interested in understanding. We want to use data to inform whether or not what's our return to work policy, if we're going to even ask people to come back to the office. And so that was an example of like, who has the data that can just tell us how many people of our remote workforce, what percent, how many miles on average do they live from an actual, office location? But that's still just reporting, right? That's not, it's helpful. It's insight, right? That can help them be a data point to help make that decision. But I agree too that it isn't linear. It's we're constantly kind of bouncing around, but I think we're always coming back to kind of like a boomerang, always coming back to that foundational, that table stake stuff, the building of the standard stuff that we need, the standard definitions, and so it's sometimes, I think, when you're brought in, right, to build a function, it's not as easy as, okay, year one, I'm going to do this, and year two, I'm going to do that, because because life happens. Right? Organizations go through mergers and acquisitions and divestitures and new rifts and changes in strategy, and so you have to constantly.
I would say, yeah, I think that all sounds really familiar and resonates. I think that the challenge that we had, and I think is fairly common, but it was trying to define what we wanted people analytics to be. So you can either take a fairly narrow view of it and say we want, as we say, what people analytics is. This is where we're going to play, and this is it. We took a wider view of that at Accenture because we wanted to make sure that the service we were providing really encompassed the end to end. And so what that meant was that we had to sort of recast the definition of what we wanted people analytics to be, and it did involve things like data scrubbing and architecture and all of that, because it informed later parts of the process and downstream people that use that information and they go work with the customers. And so, we looked at it from we took a wide view of it. The other challenge that we had was, and I think, Michael, you mentioned this, was bringing the organization along for the ride to say, okay, now we have this function, we've stood it up, and it's going to look and feel different than what we've had in the past. But it means that we need the buy-in from the business and HR leadership to have data fluency and want to be on this journey with us. It's not just about us handing you stuff fully baked. You're going to have to play a part in that to get us where we need to go. The one thing that we had to do, because you asked Stephanie, like, how do you address it? Aside from some of the sort of definitional things and organizational change things, one of the simple things that we did was, and we focus a lot on job architecture at Accenture, and we worked on that as part of people analytics, but we made sure that different people or different parts of our team that were doing different types of work had different job families. So our data science, everyone was called analytics when I joined the team. Like, it was just one job family that was used to describe the work that every single person on this 400-person team did. By the time that I left that role, we had probably 10 different job families that we were using. We had a data science job family, an analytics and modeling job family, a product management job family, a tech job family, whatever. But what we tried to do is make sure that those really encompassed, the majority of the work that those people in those teams did, so that, one, there was career progression and pathing within those or across those if you wanted to go from being a data scientist to an advisor or whatever. But it also helped us describe better what we do to the rest of the organization. Mm-hmm. And so when people were interacting with us, they could see, oh, this is my data science partner that I'm going to work with, and this is my insights partner that I'm going to work with, or whatever. So we made sure that we were very clear about defining the roles and the job families that people were doing.
Love that. And Steve, Alec asked a good question about levels. So as you all started to create these kind of differentiated, job titles, what was the leveling like in terms of reflecting career paths?
Yeah, I have a very specific opinion on this too, because we did a lot of that research at Accenture for, in professional services, which is what Accenture is, the leveling is very collapsed, and we don't have things like, I think, Michael, you're called a vice president in your current role, or someone.
Director.
Okay. But at Accenture, a director would look very different than a director in what we call industry. We had at Accenture, our leveling starts at like associate and it goes up through senior managing director. We had everything from associate, analyst, senior analyst, specialist, senior specialist, manager, senior manager, director, senior director, right? That's, we had people at all levels, and it encompassed basically the whole job structure within people analytics. We had this, again, the scale to do that. It may not exist in all organizations, but we definitely wanted to have, if you're a manager level data scientist, you're working on specific scope and specific types of projects, versus if you're a data science analyst or specialist, your job is different. You're working in the same space, but the complexity of the work you do, the type of customers you're working with or not, will be different based on the leveling of your role. And it also gives progression and career pathing, opportunities for people as they want to progress, or maybe not. Maybe they want to stay a specialist and they want to be a specialist, and that's where they want to land. Mm-hmm. We had place for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely depends upon the size of the team.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's, with an individual on my team, right? We're like, well, whatever the next title makes sense. We're a little bit, and this is live, but we're a little bit loosey-goosey with titles. So that does make it a little hard for people to think, okay, what's the next step? But we also we're very lean. So we don't have that. And I think my last organization, very similarly, we don't have that clear pathing, because actually in my case, I'm actually in a marketing job family at my current company. So
what's your job family called?
Marketing.
Oh, it's marketing. And so you're a marketing director.
I'm in the back end. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But right. I mean, that's interesting though, because that's a systematic thing, right? I mean, that's how they're classifying you or whatever. But really your functional working title is, you said people intelligence director?
Yeah. Yeah. So the difference between like your job title and your business title. So technically in the system, based on the, we use Radford, right? I've been put into a marketing job family. And I think, that was also maybe a vestige of when the team was first formed before I joined. It was like, well, we don't have one. This is the next best, right? Like, so there's, some, when you read through the actual job profile description, there's like business intelligence, there's visualization and dashboarding. And so that's kind of why the leaders, actually, I think half my team is actually in that job family. Now we are working towards creating new job families because we acquired an organization back in May. They also use Radford. And so we are starting to see more specific job families like HRIS rewards. So more kind of like job families to encompass the various functional areas within our people and culture function. So we are going through a transformation, and I'm expecting, right, that I'll have my own job family, but that's where we got put initially.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things I've also noticed, not just vertical expansion, but horizontal expansion of the titles. So I've seen in some organizations, let's say the leader of people analytics is called whatever, global head people analytics, and then it gets expanded to people data and analytics, and then it gets expanded to people data analytics technology, or depending on the direction, either in the operational direction or something even like global talent management, because now it has DEI underneath it, and it has leadership development underneath it. So somewhat of that horizontal leveling or expansion is something that I'm beginning to see as well in the past couple of years.
And sorry, I keep calling you Madura. Sorry, Madura was my first people analytics manager way back, so I abbreviate her name by the letter because she put in all of her emails back in the day. Flavia has a question. Do you think that the data architecture and portfolio tools has an impact on the amount of people you need and the type of skills you need for people analytics teams?
Sorry, let me read that again. Do you think the data architecture and portfolio of tools has an impact? The amount of people you need and the type of skill? Absolutely. I think the tools and technology, and I'll just go a little broader than just the data architecture portfolio, but what kind of tools you engage definitely has an impact on what type of skills. The number for sure, but what type of skills do we hire for? For example, we recently, in my past organization, took a new engagement platform. We signed up for a new employee engagement survey platform, and I know that's not data architecture platform, but we almost had to create a role to teach the HRBPs how to use it, right? And that's very similar to other people analytics tools and platforms as well. So what kind of skills we hire for, what roles do we establish in the team is very much dependent on the architecture that we have. Fully agree. The other example I'll give is we were building a data lake. Again, not truly people analytics, but that was the need of the hour, and then we had to go and deliver on that. So there was a huge need for a data engineer who could just look at the raw data from different source systems, and unfortunately we had quite a few of them, and then literally do the magic and enter it into the data lake. So again, a very different skill set than what the original team consisted of. But because we needed to work and get a data lake up and running, I had to hire for that. So very much so.
I would just add, Madura, I think that's all exactly the way that I experienced it as well. And I think it had a lot to do with the company's priorities as well. So we went from having an SAP as our HCM to Workday, and it required suddenly that we had a lot more people with hands-on expertise in doing reporting and analytic work inside of Workday or using Workday's tools and add-ons and things. Whereas our SAP, we never worked inside of that. We just pulled data out of it to work in Power BI or Click or whatever it was. So that was an immediate change that we needed to have. And the other thing is, as we were building our data lake and doing that, we needed a need for data engineers. I think that's I think that's like a growing skill set in the broad field of people analytics that's needed. And we also we had a mandate from our internal IT department to move all of our sort of project management to Agile. And so we suddenly needed Scrum Masters and product managers and these people that prior to that, they were maybe doing analytic work for the team, but we reskilled them and we put them through Agile certification and stuff so they could be, so it was you said the need of the hour, right? But similarly, this was a company mandate based on a strategy change or priority change that forced us to reskill and think differently about the kind of skills that we needed on the team.
Yeah, and I'm just going to echo all of that and say data engineering and data architecture, data orchestration, right? And there are vendors in the people analytics space now that are actually providing that capability for you as part of what they deliver, right? So in that case, if you're able to find that vendor partner, that vendor, then maybe you don't actually need those skills on your team, or at least the deep domain expertise, right, on the team. And maybe you can leverage, an internal, I've said this already, but like an internal IT resource, when something new comes up, but you still have that partnership with the vendor. But the technology, in order to scale, to productize what we're doing, and to scale the delivery of the insights, to scale the self-service capabilities, we either need people to build it or the technology that already exists to help roll that out. But we're always going to still need the roles that actually can help the individual stakeholders that are consuming this insight and data to figure out what to do with it. We also need those same people that have the skill set. So the three skill sets that I look for on my team that I think are exceptionally important in this field are being curious, so having a questioning mindset, and critical thinking. And when I teach my students at Columbia, I say, look, week number 1, first class, first slide, I'm teaching you how to be human resources BS detectors. Okay, so we still need those skills that can help the rest of the HR function or our other stakeholders actually understand what to do with the data, how to leverage it for good and not evil, as many of us in this industry say. But I think the technology plays a huge role, and it's definitely a different set of skills depending upon what the needs are. So.
I'm totally going to see that going forward. BS detectors.
Yeah. I teach the whole section where I'm like, okay, how do you know what you know? Right, all right, great. Now, and we call it poor decisions and HR traps, and then we talk about percent of what, right? You just don't take that number on face value. Like, dig into that, and you really need to understand it so that you are sure you're telling the right story.
I love that. I was just going to piggyback off this question, and because you guys talk a lot about getting resources, building data lakes, implementing new technologies and systems. But could you talk a little bit more about how you're kind of convincing your leadership or the larger HR leadership, the larger organization about the value of this? Because I think sometimes it's hard to show the value of something when you don't have the data to back it up, but you need that data. So any like suggestions on how you guys are kind of convincing leadership or having those conversations to get to where you go?
I'm going to be brutally honest, which is I'm having a really hard time doing that. Where I've had some small success in the past is not the big bang approach. So trying to convince just one business area, one business segment, one functional area, as opposed to trying to convince the entire organization that this is important and we should be doing it. So I do, and again, talk with peers in the space, and it is a bit of a struggle right now to get leadership attention on people analytics. Really large organizations, I'm finding that's not as big of a problem, but most of us aren't working for $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 employee organizations. And so it is hard sometimes to get the attention to think about people analytics as a whole, as opposed to. So for me, the success has been just small wins for different business areas, and still trying to tackle the whole work part of that.
I'll add to that, small wins for sure. Again, calling it pilot or let's experiment with this, and then decide if you want to go enterprise wide or not is often a road to success. Often, not all the time. The other thing I've found very useful is be very relevant to the business or HR. I mean, try to solve a problem that HR is already trying to solve or the business is already trying to solve. Don't just bring your own problem to the table just because it's going to satisfy you intellectually. And it's going to ask somebody or it's going to answer somebody who was curious to know something, right? So one of the things we did in my previous organization was they were trying to reshape performance management, and when I came into the discussion, I realized that everybody was thinking about, 15 or 20 HR people sitting together, a few business people, and deciding what the next iteration is going to look like. And I had to inject people analytics into the discussion, saying, what data do we have? And can we collect some data? So I did not have to pitch for the idea that let's try to collect data for performance management, because the problem statement already existed, right? So I pitched in the methodology, and it was a relatively easy win. We ended up doing some crowdsourcing, which included both qualitative and quantitative analysis, but being very relevant and focused on a problem that's already being solved in the business or in HR helps try to get.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there, right? It's saying, hey, you're about to kick off a new project. How do you know you're going to measure success? Bring me in, bring my team in, so we can have this conversation with you, right? As you're going through the design of the project, right? As opposed to, we rolled out this new performance management process, now we need to measure its success. So that is exactly the approach that I have to take, and I think it's so incredibly important, because we have to be thinking data up front. As opposed to I also call it a little bit of it's live again, CYA, right? It's like I've been there, I provided the input, or the teams provided the input, right? Versus at the end, they're like, okay, so now we need to measure this. Why can't your team measure this? It's your fault, right? And I do find that happens a lot too. It's like, I don't own the data. Sorry, if you brought me in earlier, we could, really think through and really, and that's the other competency, is systems thinking. Incredibly important in this space.
I think I would just, I don't know that I have anything much to add, other than, I really like the idea of experimentation and small wins, and proving things out as a way to convince the decision makers and the budget holders that this is needed. Getting in early is also important. I think the only thing that I would say that maybe is different in the view that I always took was, I need to make sure that I have the right people put in place to make it so that they're indispensable to the HR and the business leader that they're supporting. So this is where our advisor role came in really handy. And was really integral. And so, it was always a good sign when we would hear from our HR leaders and business leaders that the people analytics advisor was, indispensable to the team, an integral part of their sort of extended leadership team, and they came to them for anything. And so when we had that strength of relationship, it meant that our people were always in the know of what was going on and could get involved early, and it kind of helped solve some of those problems where we weren't just being brought in after the fact as a data provider, or to say, oh, we already think we know what the issue is and we have this set of data, now just say yes or no, is this the problem? Rather, it's more like be involved in the conversations early, so that you can help us brainstorm how to use data to solve the issues that we think we're having, or the problems that we think we're having, the questions we have, rather than it's just being, sort of a task master or doer type of role. So it was really important for us to make sure we had the right people aligned to the right customers, so that they were comfortable having them part of that core team.
Yeah, no, I completely relate to that. I think that's why we enjoy people analytics so much as professionals, because you are able to be in different spots and connect the dots for different stakeholders and kind of save them in some ways. When you say, like, well, I know that this team is working on this big project and it relates to the project that you're working on, so why don't we get together and make sure there's not redundancy? So I think it really is like a nice piece to be able to connect the dots in an organization in an HR place. So
and that, I would just say that, just to piggyback on that, maybe this is a little bit of a, but I think it's super important for people in the people analytics space to be friends with and understand the work of sales analytics people and finance analytics people, and we had geographic services analytics people, and we had cross-functional working groups of people who came together, because at Accenture we're professional services, so it's all about how do people move through our system and how do we keep them chargeable and revenue producing and all that, right? So our people analytics people actually had to really have a strong command of our financial model and how we made money at Accenture and how people translated to revenue and profitability. And you wouldn't necessarily think that would be required, but in order to make that skill, in order to build that skill, we had to have them really partnering up with the finance analytics folks. And so it's a really key relationship, I think, if you can build that and have that sharing and that collaboration, it can just make you much more effective as a people analytics professional.
Yeah, at my last company, we had an analytics community of practice, and we brought people in from anybody, right? And then at my current organization, we actually do. I join. Someone else leads it, right? Which is so I can't take responsibility for it, but it's called "What Are You Doing?" And it's just like a show and tell, like just bringing. And there are people from different parts of the organization: data scientists, analytics people, BI people, just kind of sharing their projects, getting feedback. And so we're building those relationships and learning from each other. And that's actually resulted in me personally getting involved in some really cool side projects that our technology team are working on around building skill, inferring skills from internal repositories and things like that. So
that's great.
Yep.
I love that.
And all three of you have created people analytics teams before, built them. And so what advice would you give to someone who's probably entering the field, looking at all these different titles and roles and not even knowing kind of where to start or how to decipher some of the titles in people analytics?
When we were interviewing people for our team, we would take people from all different backgrounds and stuff. But one of the things we always tried to do is make sure that they really wanted to do people work, right? So this is an analytic, it's a field, it's a technical field, right? It requires technical skills and all of that. But at the end of the day, you're most likely, depending on how the organization's structured, but you're part of a team whose job it is to further the mission of the people strategy at your organization, right? Like you're there to serve people and do what's right for the people of the organization. And so we always, made sure that was something that was kind of innate to the desire to working on the team. Like, again, you could have a lot of different skill sets and be successful on the team, but did you have this desire to work in the people space, which can be very different than working in the controller's office or sales analytics or whatever. You can find an analytic job in a lot of different parts of the organization. So it was more about the sort of what's your underlying kind of desire to working in the field.
Yeah, I would say to somebody just starting out and who may get confused with all the titles, read the job description. And I know it just sounds very obvious, but the job description should give you a fairly good idea of whether the role tilts towards more of the operational side, which can very well have an employee or people analytics title, or in the middle where it's mostly about analytics insights using complex statistical modeling, predicting turnovers, things like that. Or I've even seen people analytics job titles, but the role is really about change management or using analytics to change behavior. And all of these three are very interesting, meaningful. So there's no discounting one or the other, but I would highly advise people to read through the job description and see where among those three categories does this particular job lie. And if it is not clear, definitely have the conversation and ask questions like, what does a day in the life of X look like? And that gives you a fairly good idea of what the person does in the role. And that sometimes can be very different from what the job description states. Yeah. So that's, yeah.
And I would also add a little bit of LinkedIn sleuthing to there, right? So especially if they've got a larger team, looking at the backgrounds of the individuals that might already be on the team can give you a flavor of, oh, wow, they all come from a really strong tech background, but they're saying this role is not, right? So I think it's using lots of different data sources. I do that all the time. And just kind of look at, even, not just your hiring manager, but the people that you might be working with, because they're, again, even in the functions themselves, they may think they're one thing, but then when you kind of look at those skill sets and kind of the path that the people that are in those jobs now have taken, it can actually give you some color that you might not get otherwise.
Good advice.
What has been your favorite title that you've held?
When I was at ADP, now I was doing consulting work, building consulting practice there for HR analytics, but also working with the product management team on the ADP Data Cloud platform. My title was Human Capital Knowledge Management Advisor. So I thought that was kind of cool. So it was very unique and different, and so it helped spread across the because I those that know me, like, and you heard my background, I have a lot of interests. And so it's like, oh, I could just have this anyway. So I don't even know where we came up with the title, but anyway.
I've only ever had one title in people analytics, and it was global people analytics lead for Accenture. What I liked about it, though, was that we were intentional with choosing that nomenclature because as I explained earlier, we wanted it to be broad enough to encompass the variety of type of work. But really, what made me proud about it was that people identified with it. And so whether you were, of all of our team, we had some people that were in HR, some people in IT, but we were their customers, some people in operations, but we were their customers, so they worked on our team. But they all felt like they were doing people analytics work, right? And they were all identified as part of this team, even though they didn't maybe formally, we were very matrixed, right? They didn't formally report up into me as a direct line, but they felt like they were part of the people analytics team. And so that felt good to sort of land on that identity and be able to then manage career pathing and roles and stuff within it. But it felt good to have at least a singular identity for our people.
Yeah, I'm afraid I did not have any such unique titles. I've had pretty regular, traditional ones. But I do agree with Michael, your point that the optics matter, what you call your team, especially when you're leading a team and you're starting to build the reputation and you don't want to be known as simply a reporting team. It does matter to change the name, and it's important you do that.
And then once you've changed the name, you got to have people that bring it too, right? I mean, because you can say, yeah, we're an analytics team, and if the capabilities of your team are limited to reporting,
true.
So yeah, I think that's that identity and that sort of capability piece are super
agreed.
Yeah, and I would add, so when I changed the team name, it was part of an overall project called the People Data Strategy that I kicked off, and there were 3 different work streams, and one of them was actually around building a support model. Because what I learned in my listening journey, besides number one, I don't trust the data, like we all heard that, right? Is and this is kind of my own phrasing, is that I don't know what I don't know. This is like from the HR community, right? I don't know what I don't know, and I don't know where to go to find out about the thing that I don't know about. So they didn't know who to ask, who owned what. And so building that support model with clearly defined workflows, we're using ServiceNow, but before we're using Jira, providing knowledge articles on, okay, this is the form and you use this form for this purpose. That then helped kind of it started to help differentiate between, well, that's reporting, right? And literally it's like, I take a play off of like the Jeff Foxworthy of like, it said you might need people analytics if, right? And so, if it's a list or a account, you're not going to need people analytics, right? And so that's a reporting ticket, right? And so being able to help our customers and understand like how where they go to get help, and this is when you need this team versus when you need this team, helps as well. But if you don't build that and you just simply change the team name, nothing's going to change. People are going to still keep coming to you for the same things.
No, I love that. I think that's such an important point, like the naming of the team. We experienced a name change at VMware. We were, HR business intelligence when I joined. And then after a year or two, our leader decided that didn't really represent everything we were doing. So we became global people insights, and I was on the people science team. And while I initially didn't think that would be the best, it actually, we did grow to be like truly the people science experts, whereas there were employee listening, more like business partners. So it was really an interesting change. I guess my other question is, how do you feel like employee listening teams fit into people analytics? Because I think sometimes they're separated when you're looking at jobs. So in your experience, is it under people analytics? Are they like sister teams? Like, what do you think works best?
I'm biased. I think they need to be together. It's a source of data. And not only is it a source of data about people, but it's also data that you then might need to integrate with other data that your people analytics people need. In my last 2 companies, I've had both. I think they need to be. I think the best scenario, and then we'll use perfect example of the latest acquisition of Culture Amp of Orgnostic, right? That bringing those 2 pieces of technology together, right? So I'm biased, but I do think having them together is so incredibly important. Or worst case or next best case scenario is, as you kind of said, Rachel, sisters, but like really like working and collaborating
like
together.
twin sisters.
Yeah, exactly. Like attached to the Siamese twins, attached to the hip. So
yeah, I think I have a different opinion, and just because it's the environment I came from, but the strategic side and the execution side of the employee listening and talent strategy piece was in a different team. However, we had integrations between that group and us when it came to the data and analytics and the insights piece, and we had someone that was dedicated, more than one person on our team, on the people analytics team, to working directly with that strategic group and then executing the analytics from it. Similar to I&D, for example, or DEI, whatever you call it in your organization. There's an analytic component to that too, but it doesn't necessarily mean, in my view, that DEI needs to sit in people analytics. That people analytics needs to have a dedicated component of it that focuses on working with the upstream DEI sort of strategic group, or COE, or whatever it's called. And they in turn also need to have people focused on working directly with people analytics to give the analytic attention that it needs to have in the DEI space. So not to use a separate example, but I think it's similar.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with you there. Like the strategy and but I still, one of the, I'm an IO, Dory, you're an IO, Stephanie, you're an IO, Rachel, you're an IO, right? Yeah, so that's listening, right? That's part of what our bread and butter, right? So I think, having the analytics, the analysis, yes, and we're kind of actually going through that transformation now at my current organization, but you still need people that are designing the strategy and kind of program managing it that also understand data, right? And so it cannot be this separate group. Okay, the stuff that we don't want to analyze, we don't know how to analyze, we'll just have the people analytics team do that. But we're help, designing questions or making sure we're asking the right things and measuring the right things, right? It has to be. Otherwise, it's
sorry. Yeah, I'm just going to interrupt because I feel so strongly about it. I have a very strong opinion, and that is they should sit together. And even data and research on the analytics landscape has said that it is the most strategic way to get analytics in front of the business leaders. It is through employee listening. And even on an operational side, strategy aside, oftentimes when we have presented as people analytics the results of, let's say, the engagement survey, key driver analysis, we are talking about it, the audience fails to distinguish whether we are truly people analytics or is it employee listening, and then they'll ask a question and then it becomes, oh, that's not us, that's them. So it's just a big mess in that room. So it's always good to have them, in my opinion, in one single team. It just makes much more sense strategically and operationally.
I appreciate all the opinions on that. I agree, but I think, sometimes until there's a restructure or a transformation, those teams can sit separately or kind of be disjointed, and it takes some work to get them together.
Well, go ahead, Mandora.
No, go ahead.
I was actually going to clarify. So are we saying the analytics can sit in the team and like the program management and training can be somewhere else? Or are we saying that all of it needs to sit within the same people analytics team?
I'm saying it should all sit within the people analytics team.
Yeah, I think as with all things, you're getting a variety of opinions. I don't think there's clearly not one right way to do it. Otherwise, we would be,
I lean towards the program part of it doesn't need to sit. I lean towards, as long as the analytics is fed into the people analytics team and that part is done, people analytics, the training for leaders and all that stuff can sit somewhere else. I kind of lean towards Steve.
Well, and I would say there's a role that does that, right? But I feel like that role needs to have some of just bringing someone into program manage that doesn't actually understand survey design, that doesn't understand listening, doesn't understand. So that's where I think if you have that within the function and you can then hire, right, for those skills and capabilities, right? Do I want to be building a communication on, okay, next week? No, I don't. I really don't want to. But having a person that I'm kind of going off on a tangent now, but I do think it also is dependent upon what technologies you're using, how many people you have, what skill sets you have. But I personally would want like that, or at least make sure that that program manager has strong survey design experience. They don't have to do the numbers, but they need to understand and at a minimum. So
Yeah. Make sure you opened a can of worms with that question.
I did. It's okay. I think we might be, doing some more employee listening discussions in the future. So there.
Yes. Little tease there of more to come.
Maybe not.
But
We'll
really
see. But
appreciate everyone's time. Super, super helpful to chat with all three of you. You've all been fantastic in sharing your expertise. And so the audience has appreciated it, and lots of comments and folks joining. So thanks again.
yeah,
Thank you.
thanks everyone.
Thanks,
you.
everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.